Well, good evening. Welcome. Welcome to the stream. It is Thursday, and we're going to be doing Throwback Thursdays. First part of that is I am going to be reading The Hunger Games. I've been hankering for it, to be honest, for a while. Haven't had a very good book like The Hunger Games in a while. I love an old battle royale, and I've been needing something to fill the void. You might have noticed we have a special guest this stream. There he is, little Nimbus. That's my chinchilla, who is the mascot for this channel, Chinchilla Days. Um, what you can see there is just a ball of fluff and some ears there on the right. So he's asleep at the moment. He probably will be throughout. Chinchillas are nocturnal, of course, but he might pop his head up to say hello. And keep an eye on him there for me. Warn me if he does anything inappropriate. And we'll start at chapter 1. When I wake up, the other side of my bed is cold. My fingers stretch out, seeking Prim's warmth, but finding only the rough canvas cover of the mattress. She must have had bad dreams and climbed in with our mother. Of course she did. This is the day of the reaping. I prop myself up on one elbow. There's enough light in the bedroom to see them. My little sister, Prim, curled up on her side, cocooned in my mother's body, their cheeks pressed together. In sleep, my mother looks younger, still worn, but not so beaten down. Prim's face is fresh as a raindrop, as lovely as the primrose for which she was named. My mother was very beautiful too, or so they tell me. Sitting at Prim's knees, guarding her, is the world's ugliest cat. Mashed in nose, half of one ear missing, eyes the colour of rotting squash. Prim named him Buttercup, insisting that his muddy yellow coat matched the bright flowers. He hates me, or at least distrusts me. Even though it was years ago, I think he still remembers how I tried to drown him in a bucket when Prim had brought him home. Scrawny kitten, belly swollen with worms, crawling with fleas. The last thing I needed was another mouth to feed, but Prim begged and cried. I had to let him stay. It turned out okay. My mother got rid of the vermin, and he's a born mouser. Even catches the occasional rat. Sometimes when I clean a kill, I feed Buttercup the entrails. He has stopped hissing at me. Entrails, no hissing. This is the closest we'll ever get to love. I swing my legs off the bed and slide into my hunting boots, supple leather that is molded to my feet. I pull on trousers, a skirt, tuck my long, dark braid into a cap, and grab my forage bag. On the table under the wooden bowl, to protect it from hungry rats and cats alike, sits a perfect little goat's cheese wrapped in basil leaves. Prim's gift to me on reaping day. I put the cheese carefully in my pocket and slip outside. Our part of District 12 is named the Steam, or the Seam. It's usually crawling with coal miners, heading out to the morning shift. Men and women with hunched shoulders, swollen knuckles, many of whom had long since stopped trying to scrub the coal dust from their broken nails and the lines of their shrunken faces. But today the black cinder streets are empty. Shutters on the squat grey houses are closed. The reaping isn't until 2 days. May as well sleep in if you can. Sorry, it's not until 2. May as well sleep while you can. Our house is almost at the edge of the seam. I must have to pass a few gates to reach the scruffy field beyond, called the meadow. Separating the meadow from the woods, in fact, enclosing all of District 12, is a high chain-link fence topped with barbed wire loops. In theory, it's supposed to be electrified every 24 hours a day, as a deterrent to predators that live in the woods, packs of wild dogs, lone cougars, bears, that used to threaten our streets. But since we're lucky to get 2 or 3 hours of electricity in the evenings, it's usually safe to touch. Even so, I always take the moment to listen carefully for the hum, which means the fence is live. Right now, it's silent as stone. Concealed by a clump of bushes, I flatten out in my belly and slide under the metre-long stretch that's been loose for years. There's several other weak spots in the fence, but this one is so close to home, I always enter the woods here. As soon as I'm in the trees, I retrieve a bow and a sheath of arrows from a hollow log. Electrified or not, the fence has been successful in keeping out the flesh eaters of District 12. Inside the woods, they roam freely, and there are added concerns like venomous snakes, rabid animals, and no real paths to follow. But there's also food if you know how to find it. My father knew, and he taught me some ways before he was blown to bits in a mine explosion. There was nothing left of him to bury. I was 11 then. 5 years later, I still wake up screaming for him to run. Even though trespassing in the woods is illegal and poaching carries the severest of penalties, more people would risk it if they had weapons, but most are not bold enough to venture out with just a knife. My bow is a rarity, crafted by my father, along with a few others that I keep well hidden in the woods, carefully wrapped in waterproof covers. My father could have made good money selling them, but if the officials found out, it would probably have been publicly executed for inciting a rebellion. Most of the peacekeepers turn a blind eye to a few of us who hunt, because they're as hungry for fresh meat as anyone is. In fact, they're among our best customers. But the idea that someone might be arming the seam would never have been allowed. In the autumn, a few brave souls sneak into the woods to harvest apples, but always in the sight of the meadow, always close enough to run back to the safety of District 12 if trouble arises. District 12, where you can starve to death in safety, I mutter, and I glance quickly over my shoulder. Even here, in the middle of nowhere, you worry someone might overhear you. When I was younger, I was scared to death, the things that I would blurt out about District 12, about the people who rule our country, Panem, from the far-off city called the capital. Eventually I understood this would only lead us to more trouble, so I learned to hold my tongue and to turn my features into an indifferent mask so that no one could ever read my thoughts. I do my work quietly in school, make only polite small talk in the public market, discuss little more than trades at the Hob, in which the black market, where I make most of my money, even at home, where I am less pleasant. I avoid discussing sticky topics, like reaping, the food shortages, or the Hunger Games. Prim might begin to repeat my words, and then where would we be? In the in the woods waits the only person with whom I can be myself, Gail. I feel the muscles in my face relaxing, my pace quickening as I climb the hills to our place, a rocky ledge overlooking a valley. A thicket of berry bushes protects us from unwanted eyes. The sight of him waiting there brings on a smile. Gail says I never smile except in the woods. Hey Catnip, says Gail. My real name is Katniss, but when I first told him, I had barely whispered it, so he thought I said catnip. Then, when there was this crazy lynx that started following me around the woods, looking for handouts, it became the official nickname for me. I finally had to kill the lynx because he scared off game, but I almost regretted it, because he wasn't bad company, and I got a decent price for his pelt. Look what I shot. Gail holds up a loaf of bread with an arrow stuck in it, and I laugh. It's real bakery bread, not the flat, dense loaves we used for our grain rations. I take it in my hands, pull out the arrow, and hold the puncture in the crust to my nose, inhaling the fragrance that makes my mouth flood with saliva. Fine bread like this for special occasions. Still warm, I say. He must have been at the bakery at the crack of dawn to trade for it. What did it cost you? Just a squirrel. I think the old man was feeling sentimental this morning, said Gail. Even wish me luck. Well, we all feel a little closer today, don't we? I say, not bothering to roll my eyes. Prim left us a cheese. I pull it out. His expression brightens as the treat. Oh, at the treat. Thank you, Prim. We'll have a real feast. He suddenly falls into the capital accent as he mimics Effie Trinket, the manically upbeat woman who arrives once a year to read out our names at the reaping. I almost forgot. Happy Hunger Games. He plucks a few blackberries from the bushes around us, and may the odds, he tosses a berry in a high arc towards me. I catch it in my mouth and break the delicate skin with my teeth. A sweet tartness explodes across my tongue. Be ever in your favour, I finish with equal verve. We have to joke about it, because the alternative is to be scared out of your wits. Besides, the capital accent is so affected, almost everything sounds funny in it. I watch as Gil pulls out his knife and slices the bread. He could be my brother. Straight black hair, olive skin. We have the same grey eyes, but we're not related, at least not closely. Most of our families who work in the mines resemble one another this way. That's why my mother and Prim, with their light hair and blue eyes, always look out of place. They are. My mother's parents were part of a small merchant class that catered to officials, peacekeepers, and the occasional steam customer. They ran an apothecary shop in the nicer part of District 12. Since almost no one can afford doctors, apothecaries are our healers. My father got to know my mother because on his hunts he would sometimes collect medicinal herbs and sell them to her shop where she brewed into remedies. She must have really loved him to leave her home for the same. I try to remember that all when I see as the woman who was sat by, blank and unreachable, while her children turned to skin and bones. I try to forgive her for my father's sake, but to be honest, I'm not the forgiving type. Gail spreads the bread slices with a soft goat's cheese, carefully placing a basil leaf on each, while I strip the bushes of their berries. We settle back in a nook in the rocks. From this place we are invisible, but we have a clear view of the valley, which is teeming with summer life, greens to gather, roots to dig, fish iridescent in the sunlight. The day is glorious, with a soft blue sky and soft breeze. The food's wonderful, with the cheese seeping into the warm bread and the berries bursting in our mouths. Everything would be perfect if it really was a holiday. If all the day off meant was roaming the mountains with Gail, hunting for tonight's supper. But instead we have to be standing in the square at 2 o'clock, waiting for our names to be called out. We could do it, you know, Gail says quietly. What? I ask. Leave the district, run off, live in the woods, you and I. We could make it, says Gail. I don't know how to respond. The idea is so preposterous. If we didn't have so many kids, he adds quickly. They're not our kids, of course, but they might as well be. Gail's two little brothers and a sister, Prim, and you may well throw in our mothers too, because how would they live without us? Who would fill those mouths that they're always asking for more? With both of us hunting daily, there's still nights when the game has to be swapped for lard, or shoelaces, or wool. Still nights when we go to bed with our stomachs growling. I never want to have kids, I say. I might, if I didn't live here, says Gail. But you do, I say, irritated. Forget it, he snaps back. This conversation feels all wrong. Leave? How could I leave Prim, who is the only person in the world I am certain I love? And Gail is devoted to his family. We can't leave, so why bother talking about it? And even if we did, where did this stuff about having kids comes from? There's never been anything romantic between Gail and me. When we met, I was a skinny 12-year-old, and although he was 2 years older, he already looked like a man. It took a long time for us to even become friends, to stop haggling over every trade and begin helping each other out. Besides, if he wants kids, Gail won't have any trouble finding a wife. He's good looking, he's strong. strong enough to handle the work in the mines. He can hunt. You can tell by the way the girls whisper about him when he walks by the school that they want him, and it makes me jealous, but not for the reason people would think. Good hunting partners are hard to find. What do you want to do? I ask. We can hunt, fish, or gather. Let's fish at the lake. We can leave our poles and gather in the woods. Let's get something nice for tonight, he says. Tonight, after the reaping, everyone is supposed to celebrate, and a lot of people do, out of relief that their children have been spared another year. But at least two families will pull their shutters, lock their doors, and try to figure out how to survive the painful weeks to come. We do as well. The predators ignore us in the day, when the easier, tastier prey abounds. By late morning, we have a dozen fish, a bag of greens, and, best of all, a large quantity of strawberries. I found a patch a few years ago, but Gail had a great idea to string mesh nets around it to keep out the animals. On the way home, we swing by the Hob, the black market that that operates in the abandoned warehouse that once held coal. Yes, publicity hound. He's very cute, isn't he? Ah, he's very funny. Yeah, he stayed still as well. No, he must be asleep. On the way home, we swing by the Hob, the black market that operates in the abandoned warehouse that once held coal. When they come up with a more efficient system that transports the coal directly from the mines to the trains, the Hob gradually took over the space. Most businesses are closed by this time, on reaping day, but the black market's still fairly busy. We easily trade 6 of the fish for good bread, the other 2 for salt. Greasy Say, the bony old woman who sells bowls of hot soup from the large kettle, takes half the greens off our hands in exchange for a couple of chunks of paraffin. We might do a tad better elsewhere, but we make an effort to keep on good terms with Greasy Say. She's the only one who can consistently be counted on to buy wild dog. We don't hunt them on purpose, but if you're attacked and you take out a dog or two, well, meat is meat. Once it's in the soup, we'll call it beef, Greasy Say says with a wink. No one in the scene would turn their nose up at a good leg of wild dog, but the peacekeepers who come to the Hob can afford to be a little choosier. We finish our business at the market, and we go back to the door of the mayor's house to sell half the strawberries, knowing that he has a particular fondness for them and can afford our price. The mayor's daughter, Madge, opens the door. She's in my year at school. Being the mayor's daughter, you'd expect her to be a snob, but she's all right. She just keeps to herself, like me. Since neither of us has really a group of friends, we seem to end up together a lot at school, eating lunch, sitting next to each other in assemblies, partnering for sports activities. We rarely talk, which suits both of us just fine. Today, her drab school outfit has been replaced by an expensive white dress, and her blonde hair is done up with a pink ribbon, reaping clothes. Pretty dress, says Gail. Madge shoots him a look, trying to see if it's a genuine compliment or if he's just being ironic. It is a pretty dress, but she would never be wearing it ordinarily. She presses her lips together, then smiles. Well, if I end up going to the capital, I want to look nice, don't I? Now it's Gail's turn to be confused. Does she mean it, or is she just messing with him? I'm guessing the second. You won't be going to the capital, says Gail coolly. His eyes land on a small circular pin that adorns her dress. Real gold, beautifully crafted. It could keep a family in bread for months. What can you have? 5 entries? I had 6 when I was 12 years old. That's not her fault, I say. No, it's no one's fault. Just the way it is, says Gail. Madge's face has become closed off. She puts the money for the berries in my hand. Good luck, Katniss. You too, I say, and close the door. We walk towards the seam in silence. I don't like that Gail took a dig at Madge, but he's right, of course. The reaping system is unfair, with the poor getting the worst of it. You become eligible for the reaping the day you turn 12. That year, your name is entered once, at 13, twice, and so on until you reach the age of 18, the final year of eligibility, when your name goes into the pool 7 times. That's true for every citizen in all 12 districts in the entire country of Penem. But here's the catch. Say you're poor and starving, as we were, you can opt to add your name in more times in exchange for a tesserae. Each tessera is worth a meagre year's supply of grain and oil for one person. You may do this for each of your family members as well. So at the age of 12, I had my name entered 4 times. Once because I had to, and 3 times for tesserae, for grain, oil, for myself, Prim, and my mother. In fact, every year I've had to do this, and the entries are cumulative. So now, at the age of 18 or 16, my name will be in the reaping 20 times. Gail, who is 18, has been either helping or single-handedly feeding a family of 5 for 7 years, will have his name in 42 times. You can see why someone like Mage, who has never been at risk of needing a tessera, can set him off. The chance of her name being drawn is very slim compared to the two of us who live in the same. Not impossible, but slim. And even though rules are set up by the capital and not the districts, certainly not Mage's family, it's hard not to resent those who have to sign or who have to sign up for tesserae. Gil knows his anger at Midge is misdirected. On other days, deep in the woods, I would have listened to him rant about how tesserae are just another tool to cause misery in our district, a way to plant hatred between them, the starving workers of the seam, and those who can generally count on supper, and thereby ensure we will never trust one another. It's to the capital's advantage to have us divided amongst ourselves. He might say, if there were no ears but mine to hear, but it wasn't reaping day, or if it wasn't reaping day. If a girl with a real gold pin had no tesserae, had not made what I'm sure she thought was a harmless comment. As we walk, I glance over at Gail's face, still smouldering underneath his stony expression. His rages seem pointless to me, although I never say so. It's not that I don't agree with him, I do. But what good is yelling about the capital in the middle of the woods? It doesn't change anything. It doesn't make things fair. It doesn't fill our stomachs. In fact, it scares off the nearby game. I let him yell, though. Better he does it in the woods than in the district. Gail and I divide our spoils, leaving 2 fish, a couple of loaves of good bread, greens, and a handful of strawberries, salt, paraffin, and a bit of money for each of us. See you in the square, I say. Wear something pretty, he says flatly. At home, I find my mother and sister are ready to go. My mother wears a fine dress from her apothecary days. Prim is in my first reaping outfit, a skirt and ruffled blouse. It's a bit big on her, but my mother has made it stay on with pins. Even so, she's having trouble keeping the blouse tucked in at the back. A tub of warm water waits for me. I scrub off dirt and sweat from the woods and even wash my hair. To my surprise, my mother has laid out one of her own lovely dresses for me, a soft blue thing with matching shoes. Are you sure? I ask. I'm trying to get past rejecting offers of help from her. For a while, I was so angry I wouldn't allow her to do anything for me, and this was something special. Her clothes from her past were precious to her. Of course, let's put up your hair too, she says. I let her towel dry it and braid it on my head. I can hardly recognize myself in the cracked mirror that leans against the wall. You look You look beautiful, says Prim in a hushed voice. And nothing like myself, I say. I hug her, because I know the next hours will be terrible for her. Her first reaping. She's about as safe as you can get. She's only entered once. I wouldn't let her take out any tesserae. But she's worried about me, that the unthinkable might happen. protect Prim in every way I can, but I'm powerless against the reaping. The anguish I always feel when she's in pain wells up in my chest and threatens to register on my face. I notice her blouse has pulled out of her skirt, in the back again. I force myself to stay calm. Tuck in your tail, little duck, I say, smoothing her blouse back in place. Prim giggles and gives me a small quack. Quack yourself, I say with a light laugh, the kind only Prim can draw out of me. Come on, let's eat, I say, and plant a quick kiss on the top of her head. The fish and greens are already cooking in a stew, but that will be for supper. We decide to save the strawberries and the bakery bread for this evening's meal, to make it special, we say. Instead, we drink milk from Prim's goat, Lady, and eat the rough bread made from the tessera grain, although no one has much appetite anyway. At 1 o'clock, we head for the square. Attendance is mandatory unless you're on death's door. This evening, officials will come around to check to see if this is the case. If not, you'll be imprisoned. It's too bad, really, that they hold the reaping in the square, one of the few places in District 12 that can be pleasant. The square is surrounded by shops, and on public market days, especially if there's good weather, it has a holiday feel to it. But today, despite the bright banners hanging on the buildings, there's an air of grimness. The camera crews, perched like buzzards on rooftops, only add to the effect. People file in silently and sign in. The reaping is a good opportunity for the capital to keep tabs on the population as well. 12 to 18-year-olds are herded into roped areas marked off by ages, the oldest in the front, the young ones, like Prim, towards the back. Family members line up around the perimeter, holding tightly to one another's hands. But there are others too, those who have no one they love to stake, or who no longer care, who slip among the crowd, taking bets on the two kids whose names will be drawn. Odds are given on their age, whether they're a seam or merchant, if they will break down and weep. Most refuse dealing with the racketeers, but carefully, carefully. These seam people tend to be informers, and who hasn't broken the law? But I could be shot on a daily basis for hunting. But the appetites of those in charge protect me. Not everyone can claim the same. Anyway, Gail and I agree that if we have to choose between dying of hunger and a bullet to the head, the bullet would be much quicker. The space gets tighter, more claustrophobic as more people arrive. The square is quite large, but not enough to hold District 12's entire population of about 8,000. Latecomers are directed to the adjacent streets where they can watch the event on screens as it's televised live by the state. I find myself standing in a clump of 16s from the seam. We all exchange terse nods, then focus our attention on the temporary stage that's set up before the Justice buildings. It holds 3 chairs, a podium, and 2 large glass balls, one for the boys, one for the girls. I stare at the paper slips in the girls' ball. 20 of them have Katniss Everdeen written on them in careful handwriting. 2 of the 3 chairs fill with Mage's father, Mayor Undersea, who's a tall, balding man, and Effie Trinket, District 12's escort, fresh from the capital with her scary, white grin, pinkish hair, and green suit. They murmur to each other, then look with concern at the empty seat. Just as the town clock strikes 2, the mayor steps up to the podium and begins to read. It's the same story every year. He tells the history of Panem, the country that rose out of the ashes of a place that was once called North America. He lists the disasters, the droughts, the storms, the fires, the encroaching seas that swallowed up so much of the land, the brutal war for which little sustenance remained. The result was Panem, a shining capital ringed by 13 districts, which brought peace and prosperity to its citizens. in the dark days of the uprising of the districts against the capital. 12 were defeated, the 13th obliterated. The Treaty of Treason gave us new laws to guarantee peace, and, with our yearly reminder that the dark days were never to be repeated, it gave us the Hunger Games. The rules of the Hunger Games were simple. In punishment for the uprising, each of the 12 districts must provide one girl and one boy, called tributes, to participate. The 24 tributes will be imprisoned in a vast outdoor area that can hold anything from a burning desert to frozen wasteland over a period of several weeks. The competitors must fight to the death. The last tribute standing wins. Taking the kids from our districts, forcing them to kill one another while we watch. This is the capital's way of reminding us how totally we are at their mercy, how little chance we would stand of surviving another rebellion. Whatever words they use, the real message is clear. Look how we take your children and sacrifice them. There's nothing you can do. If you lift a finger, we'll destroy every last one of you, just as we did in District 13. I am going to... No, you know what? There's only a page left of this chapter and then I'll have a break. Sorry, my voice is on the fruits. To make it humiliating as well as torturous, the capital requires us to treat the Hunger Games as a festivity, a sporting event, pitching every district against the others. The last tribute alive receives the life of ease back home, and their district will be showered with prizes, largely consisting of food. All year, the capital will show the winning districts, shower the winning districts, uh, gifts of grain and oil, and even delicacies like sugar, while the rest of us battle starvation. It's both a time for repentance and a time of thanks, intones the mayor. He reads the list of past District 12 victors. In 74 years, we've only had two. Only one still alive, Hamish Abernethy, a paunchy, middle-aged man who at this moment appears hollering something unintelligible, staggers onto the stage and falls into the third chair, very drunk. The crowd responds with its token applause, but he's confused and tries to give Effie Trinket a big hug, which she barely manages to fend off. The mayor looks distressed. Since all of this is being televised, right now District 12 is the laughingstock of Panem, and he knows it. He quickly tries to pull the attention back to the reaping by introducing Effie Trinket. Bright and bubbly as ever, Effie Trinket trots to the podium and gives her signature, "Happy Hunger Games, may the odds be ever in your favour." Her pink hair must be a wig, because her curls have shifted slightly off-centre since her encounter with Hamish. She goes on a bit about what an honour it is to be here, although everyone knows she's just acting to get bumped up to a better district, where they have proper victors, not drunks who molest you in front of a tired nation. Through the crowd, I spot Gail looking back at me with a ghost of a smile. As reapings go, this one is, at least, has a slight entertainment factor. But suddenly I'm thinking of Gail and his 42 names in that big glass ball, and how the odds are not in his favour, not compared to a lot of the boys. And maybe he's thinking the same about me, because his face darkens and he turns away. But there's still thousands of slips. I wish I could whisper to him. It's time for the drawing. Effie Trinket says, as she always does, "Ladies first." She crosses to the glass ball with the girls' names. She reaches in, digs her hand deep into the ball, and pulls out a slip of paper. The crowd draws in a collective breath, and then you can hear a pin drop. I'm feeling nauseous, and so desperately hoping that it's not me, that it's not me, that it's not me. Effie Trinket crosses back to the podium, smooths the slip of paper, and reads out the name in a clear voice. And it's not me. It's Primrose Everdeen. End of chapter 1. Lovely. I'm going to grab a quick drink, be back in 2 seconds. And we're back. Chapter 2. One time, when I was in a high tree, waiting motionless for game to wander by, I dozed off and fell 3 meters to the ground, landing on my back. It was as if the impact had knocked every wisp of air from my lungs, and I lay there, struggling to inhale, to exhale, to do anything. That's how I feel now, trying to remember how to breathe, unable to speak, totally stunned as the name bounces around inside my skull. Someone is gripping my arm, a boy from the seam. I think maybe he started to fall and he caught me, or I started to fall and he caught me. There must have been some mistake. This can't be happening. Prim only had one slip of paper in thousands. Her chances of being chosen were so remote, I'd not even bothered to worry about her. Hadn't I done everything? Taken the tesserae? Refused to let her do that the same? One slip. One slip in thousands. The odds had been entirely in her favour, and it hadn't mattered. Somewhere, far away, I can hear the crowd murmuring unhappily, as they always do when a 12-year-old gets chosen, because no one thinks it's fair. And then they see her, blood drained from her face, hands clenched into fists at her sides, walking with stiff, small steps up toward the stage, passing me, and I see the black of her blouse has become untucked. It hangs out over her skirt. It's this detail, the untucked blouse forming a duck's tail, that brings me back to myself. Prim! The strangled cry comes from my throat as the muscles begin to move again. Prim! I don't need to shove through the crowd. The other kids made way immediately, allowing me a straight path to the stage. I reach her just as she's about to mount the steps. With one sweep of my arm, I push her behind me. I volunteer, I gasp. I volunteer as tribute. There's some confusion on the stage. District 12 hasn't had a volunteer in decades, and the protocol has become rusty. The rule is that once a tribute's name has been pulled from the ball, another eligible boy, if the boy's name has been read, or girl, if the girl's name has been read, can, that is a confusing sentence, right? The rule is that once a tribute's name has been pulled from the ball, another eligible boy, if a boy's name has been read, or a girl, if a girl's name has been read, can step forward and take his or her place. In some districts in which winning the reaping is such a great honour, people are eager to risk their lives, and our volunteering is complicated. But in District 12, where the word tribute is pretty much synonymous with the word corpse, volunteers are all but extinct. Lovely, says F.A. Trinket, but I believe it's a small matter of introducing the reaping winner and then asking for volunteers. And if one does come forth, then her voice trails off, unsure of herself. What does it matter? Says the mayor. He's looking at me with a pained expression on his face. He doesn't know me really, but there's a faint recognition there. I'm the girl who brings the strawberries, the girl his daughter might have spoken to or spoken of on occasion, the girl who 5 years ago stood huddled with her mother and sister as he presented her, the oldest child, with a medal of valor, a medal for her father, vaporized in the mines. Does he remember that? What does it matter? He repeats gruffly. Let her come forward. Prim is screaming hysterically behind me. She's wrapped her skinny arms around me like a vice. No, Katniss, you can't go. Prim, let go, I say harshly, because this is upsetting me and I don't want to cry. And they televise the replay of the reapings tonight. Everyone will make note of my tears. I'll be marked as an easy target, a weakling. I'll give no one that satisfaction. Let go. I can feel someone pulling her from my back. I turn and see Gale has lifted Prim off the ground, and she's thrashing in his arms. Up you go, Catnip, he says in a voice that's fighting to keep steady. Then he carries Prim off towards my mother. I steel myself and climb the steps. Well, bravo, gushes Effie Trinket. That's the spirit of the games. She's pleased to finally have a district with a little action going on in it. What's your name? I swallow hard. Katniss Everdeen, I say. I bet my buttons that was your sister. Don't want her to steal all the glory, do we? Come on, everyone. Let's give a big round of applause to our newest tribute, trills Effie Trinket. To the everlasting credit of the people of District 12, not one person claps. Not even the ones holding betting slips. The ones who are usually beyond caring. Possibly because they know me from the Hob, or that they knew my father, or have encountered Prim, whom no one can help but love. So instead of acknowledging applause, I stand there, unmoving, while they take part in the boldest form of dissent they can manage, silence, which says we do not agree, we do not condone, all of this is wrong. Then something unexpected happens. At last, I didn't expect it because I didn't think of District 12 as a place that cares about me, but a shift has occurred since I stepped up in Prim's place, and now it seems I've become someone precious. At first one, then the other, then almost every member of the crowd touches the three middle fingers in their left hand to their lips and holds it out to me. This is an old and rarely used gesture in our district, occasionally seen at funerals. It means thanks, it means admiration, it means goodbye to someone you love. Now I am truly in danger of crying, but fortunately Hamish chooses this time to come staggering across the stage to congratulate me. Look at her, look at this one, he hollers, throwing an arm around my shoulders. He's surprisingly strong for such a wreck. I like her. His breath reeks of liquor. It's been a long time since he's had a bath. Lots of, he can't think of the word for a while. Spunk, he says triumphantly. More than you. He releases me and starts for the front of the stage. More than you, he shouts directly into a camera. Is he addressing the audience, or is he so drunk he might actually be taunting the Capitol? I'll never know, because just as he's opening his mouth to continue, Hamish plummets off the stage and knocks himself unconscious. He's disgusting, but I'm grateful. With every camera gleefully trained on him, I have just enough time to release the small, choked sound from my throat and compose myself. I put my hands behind my back, stare into the distance. I can see the hills I climbed this morning with Gale. For a moment, I yearned for something. The idea of us leaving the district, making our way in the woods. But I know I was right not running off, because who else would have volunteered for Prim? Hamish is whisked away on a stretcher, and Effie Trinket is trying to get the ball rolling again. What an exciting day, she warbles as she attempts to straighten her wig, which has listed severely to the right. But more excitement to come, this time to choose our boy tribute. Clearly hoping to contain her tenuous hair situation, she plants one hand on her head as she crosses to the ball that contains the boys' names, and grabs the first slip she encounters. She zips back to the podium. I don't even have time to wish for Gale's safety, and she's reading the name. Peter Malark? Peter Malark? Oh no, I think. Not him, because I recognize this name, although I've never spoken directly to its owner. Peter Malark. No, the odds are not in my favour today. I watch him as he makes his way towards the stage. Medium height, stocky build, ashy blonde hair that falls in waves over his forehead. The shock of the moment registered on his face. You can see a struggle to remain emotionless, but his blue eyes show the alarm I've seen so often in Prey. Yet he climbs steadily to the stage and takes his place. Effie Trinket asks for volunteers, but no one steps forward. He has two older brothers, I know. I've seen them in the bakery, but one is probably too old now to volunteer, and the other won't. This is standard. Family devotion only goes so far for most people on reaping day. What I did was a radical thing. The mayor begins to read the long, dull treaty of treason, as he does every year at this point. It's required, but I'm not listening to a word. Why him? I think. Then I try to convince myself it doesn't matter. Peter Malark and I are not friends, not even neighbours. We don't speak. Our only real interaction happened years ago. He's probably forgotten it, but I haven't. I know I never will. During the worst time, my father had been killed in the mine 3 months earlier. It was the bitterest January anyone could remember. The numbness of his loss had passed, but the pain would hit me out of nowhere, doubling me over, racking my body with sobs. Where are you? I would cry out in my mind. Where have you gone? Of course, there was never any answer. The district had given us a small amount of money as compensation for his death, enough to cover 1 month of grieving, after which time my mother would be expected to get a job, only she didn't. She didn't do anything but sit propped up in a chair or, more often, huddled underneath the blankets on her bed, eyes fixed upon some point in the distance. Once in a while she'd stir, get up as if moved by some urgent purpose, only to then collapse back into stillness. No amount of pleading from Prim seemed to affect her. I was terrified. I suppose now that my mother was locked in some dark world of sadness. But at the time, all I knew was that I had lost not only my father, but my mother as well. At 11 years old, with Prim just 7, I took over as head of the family. There was no choice. I bought our food at the market and cooked it as best I could. I tried to keep Prim and myself looking presentable, because if it had become known that my mother could no longer care for us, the district would have taken us away from her and placed us in a community home. I'd grown up seeing those home kids at school, the sadness, the marks of angry hands on their faces, the hopelessness that curled in their shoulders forwards. I could never let that happen to Prim, sweet tiny Prim, who cried when I cried, before she even knew the reason, who brushed and plaited my mother's hair before we left for school, who still polished my father's shaving mirror each night because she hated the layer of coal dust that settled on it, like everything in the scene. The community home would crush her like a bug, so I kept our predicament a secret. But the money ran out, and we were slowly starving to death. There was no other way to put it. I kept telling myself if only I could hold out until May, just the 8th of May, when I turned 12, I'd be able to sign up for the Tesserae and get that precious grain and oil to feed us. Only there were still several weeks to go. We would be dead by then. Starvation's not uncommon, an uncommon a fate in District 12. Who hasn't seen the victims? Older people who can't work, children from a family with too many to feed, those injured in the mines, straggling through the streets. And one day you came upon them, sitting motionless or lying against a wall in the meadow. You hear the wails from a house, and the peacekeepers are called to retrieve the body. Starvation is never the cause of death officially. It's always the flu, or exposure, or pneumonia. But that fools no one. On the afternoon of my encounter with Peter Malark, the rain was falling over the restless, icy streets. I'd been in town, trying to trade some threadbare old baby clothes of Prim's in the public market, but there were no takers. Although I'd been to the Hob on several occasions with my father, I was too frightened to venture into that rough, gritty place alone. The rain had soaked through my father's hunting jacket, leaving me chilled to the bone. For 3 days we did nothing but boiled water and some old, dried mint leaves that I'd found in the back of the cupboard. By the time the market closed, I was shaking so hard I dropped my bundle of baby clothes in a muddy puddle. I didn't pick them up for fear that I would kneel over and be unable to regain my feet. Perhaps besides, no one wanted those clothes. I couldn't go home, because at home was my mother with her dead eyes, and my little sister with her hollow cheeks and cracked lips. I couldn't walk into that room with the smoky fire from the lamp branches that I had scavenged at the edge of the woods after the coal had run out, my hands empty of any hope. I found myself stumbling along a muddy lane behind the shops that serve the wealthiest townspeople. The merchants live above their businesses, so I was essentially in their back gardens. I remember the outline of the garden beds, not yet planted for spring, a goat or two in a pen, one sodden dog tied to a post, hunched, defeated in the muck. All forms of stealing are forbidden in District 12, punishable by death. But it crossed my mind there might be something in the rubbish bins, and they were fair game. Perhaps a bone at the butcher's, or rotted vegetables at the grocer's, something no one but my family desperate enough to eat. Unfortunately, the bins had just been emptied. When I passed the baker's, the smell of fresh bread was so overwhelming I felt dizzy. The ovens were on in the back, and the golden glow spilled out into the open. I stood mesmerized by the heat and the luscious scent until the rain interfered, running its icy fingers down my back, forcing me back to life. I lifted the lid of the baker's rubbish bin and found it spotlessly, heartlessly bare. Suddenly, a voice was screaming at me, and I looked up to see the baker's wife, telling me to move on. Did I want her to call the peacekeepers, and how sick she was of having brats from the seam pawing through her rubbish? The words were ugly. I had no defence. As I carefully replaced the lid and backed away, I noticed him, a boy with blonde hair peering out from behind his mother's back. I'd seen him at school. He was in my year, but I didn't know his name. He stuck with the town kids, so how would I? His mother went back into the bakery, grumbling, but he must have been watching me. As I made my way behind the pen that held their pig, I leaned against the far side of an old apple tree. The realization that I'd have nothing to take home for my family finally sunk in. My knees buckled, and I slid down the tree to its roots. It was too much. I was too sick and weak and tired. Oh, so tired. Let them call the peacekeepers and take us to a community home, I thought. Or better yet, let me die here in the rain. There was a clatter in the bakery, and I heard the woman screaming again, the sound of a blow, and I vaguely wondered what was going on. Feet sloshed towards me through the mud, and I thought, it's her. She's coming to drive me away with a stick. But it wasn't her. It was a boy. In his arms he carried 2 loaves of bread that must have fallen into the fire because the crusts were scorched black. His mother was yelling, "Feed it to the pigs, you stupid creature." Why not? No one decent will buy burned bread. He began to tear off chunks from the burned parts and toss them into the trough. And the front of uh, and the front bakery bell rung, and the mother disappeared to help a customer. The boy never even glanced my way, but I was watching him because of the bread, because of the red wheal that stood out on his cheekbone. What had she hit him with? My parents never hit us. I couldn't even imagine it. The boy took one look back at the bakery, as if checking the coast was clear, then his attention was back on the pig. He threw a loaf of bread in my direction. The second quickly followed, and he sloshed back to the bakery, closing the kitchen door tightly behind him. I stared at the loaves in disbelief. They were fine, perfect really, except for the burned area. Did he mean for me to have them? He must have, because there they were at my feet, before anyone could witness what had happened. I shoved the loaves up under my shirt, wrapped the hunting jacket tightly around me, and walked swiftly away. The heat of the bread burned into my skin, but I clutched it tighter, clinging to life. By the time I reached home, the loaves had cooled somewhat, but the insides were still warm. When I dropped them on the table, Prim's hands reached to tear off a chunk, but I made her sit, forced my mother to join us at the table, and poured warm tea. I scraped off the black stuff and sliced the bread. We ate an entire loaf, slice by slice. It was good, hearty bread filled with raisins and nuts. I put my clothes to dry at the fire, crawled into bed, and fell into a dreamless sleep. It didn't occur to me until the next morning that the boy might have burned the bread on purpose, might have dropped the loaves into the flames, knowing it meant being punished, and then delivering them to me. But I dismissed this. It must have been an accident. Why would he have done it? He didn't even know me. Still, just throwing me the bread was an enormous kindness. That would have surely resulted in a beating if discovered. I couldn't explain his actions. We ate slices of bread for breakfast and headed to school. It was as if spring had come overnight. Warm, sweet air, fluffy clouds. At school, I passed the boy in the hall. His cheek had swelled up, and his eye had blackened. He was with his friends and didn't acknowledge me in any way. But as I collected Prim and started home that afternoon, I found him staring at me from across the schoolyard. Our eyes met for only a second, then he turned his head away. I dropped my gaze, embarrassed. That's when I saw it, the first dandelion of the year. A bell went off in my head, and I thought of the hours spent in the woods with my father, and I knew how we were going to survive. To this day, I can never shake the connection between this boy, Peter Malark, and the bread that gave me hope, and the dandelion that reminded me that I was not doomed. And more than once, I've turned in the school hallway and caught his eyes, training on me, only to quickly flit away. I feel like I owe him something. I hate owing people. Maybe if I thanked him at some point, I'd feel less conflicted now. I thought about it a couple of times, but the opportunity never seemed to present itself, and now it never will, because we're going to be thrown into an arena to fight to the death. Exactly how am I supposed to work in a thank you in there? Somehow it just won't seem sincere if I'm trying to slit his throat. The mayor finishes the treaty of treason and motions for Peter and me to shake hands. His are solid, warm as those loaves of bread. Peter looks me right in the eye and gives my hand what I think is meant to be a reassuring squeeze. Maybe it's just a nervous spasm. We turn back to face the crowd as the anthem of Panem plays. Oh well, I think. There'll be 24 of us. Odds are someone else will kill him before I do. Of course, the odds have not been very dependable of late. And that's the end of chapter 2. We did it on time. There's time for chapter 3. I'm going to take a short break. Be back in a minute. And we're back. I'm going to be starting chapter 3 now. Book's much darker than the movie, isn't it? I didn't remember it being this dark. The moment the anthem ends, we're taken into custody. I don't mean we're handcuffed or anything, but a group of peacekeepers marches us through the front door of the Justice Building. Maybe tributes have tried to escape in the past. I've never seen it happen, though. Once inside, I'm conducted into a room. Conducted into a room. That is the word. And left alone. It's the richest place I've ever been in, with thick, deep carpets and velvet couch and chairs. I know it's velvet because my mother has a dress with a collar made of the stuff. When I sit on the couch, I can't help running my fingers over the fabric repeatedly. It helps calm me as I try to prepare for the next hour, the time allotted for the tributes to say goodbye to their loved ones. I cannot afford to get upset, to leave this room with puffy eyes and a red nose. Crying is not an option. There'll be more cameras in the train station. My sister and my mother come first. I reach out to Prim and she climbs on my lap, her arms around my neck, head on my shoulders, just like she did when she was a toddler. My mother sits beside me and wraps her arms around us. For a few minutes, we say nothing. Then I start telling them all the things they must remember to do, now that I will not be there to do them for them. Prim is not to take any tesserae. They can get by, if they're careful, on selling Prim's goat's milk and cheese at the small apothecary business my mother now runs for the people of the seam. Gail will get her herbs that she doesn't grow herself, but she must be very careful to describe them because he's not as familiar with them as I am. He'll also bring them game. He and I made a pact about this a year or so ago and will probably not ask for compensation, but they should thank him with some sort of trade, like milk or medicine. I don't bother suggesting Prim learns to hunt. I tried to teach her a couple of times, and it was disastrous. The woods terrified her, and whenever I shot something, she'd get all teary and talk about how we might be able to heal it, and if we can get home soon enough. But she does well with her goat, so I concentrate on that. When I'm done with the instructions about fuel and trading and staying in school, I turn to my mother and grip her arm hard. Listen to me. Are you listening to me? She nods, alarmed by my intensity. She must know what's coming. You can't leave again, I say. My mother's eyes find the floor. I know, I won't. I couldn't help what. Well, you have to help it this time. You can't clock out and leave Prim on her own. There's no me now to keep you both alive, and doesn't matter what happens. It doesn't matter what happens. Whenever you see the screen, you have to promise me you'll fight through it. My voice has risen to a shout. In it, all the anger, all the fear I felt, and abandonment. She pulls her arm from my grasp, moved to anger herself now. I was ill. How could I have treated myself if I had had the medicine? Or I could have treated myself if I had had the medicine I have now. That part about her being ill might be true. I've seen her bring back people suffering from immobilizing sadness since. Perhaps it was a sickness, but it's one we couldn't afford. Then take it, and take care of her, I say. I'll be all right, Katniss, says Prim, clasping my face in her hands. But you have to take care too. You're so fast and brave. Maybe you can win. I can't win, Prim. Prim must know that with all my heart. The competition will be far beyond my abilities. Kids from wealthier districts, where winning is a huge honour, who've been training their whole lives for this. Boys who are 2, 3 times my size. Girls who know 20 different ways to kill you with a knife. Oh, and there'll be people like me too, people to weed out before the real fun begins. Maybe, I say, because I can hardly tell my mother to carry on if I've already given up on myself. Besides, it isn't in my nature to go down without a fight, even when things seem insurmountable. We might then would be as rich as Hamish. I don't care if we're rich. I just want you to come home. You will try, won't you? Really, really try? Asks Prim. Really, really try. I swear it, I say, and I know, because of Prim, I have to. And then the peacekeeper is at the door, signaling that our time is up, and we're all hugging one another so hard it hurts. And all I'm saying is, I love you both. And we're saying it back, and then the peacekeeper orders them out of the door. I bury my head in one of the velvet pillows as if I can block this whole thing out. Someone else enters the room, and when I look up, I'm surprised to see it's the baker, Peter Millark's father. I can't believe he's come to visit me. After all, I'll be trying to kill his son soon. But we do know each other a bit, and he knows Prim even better. When she sells her goat's cheeses at the hob, she puts two of them aside for him, and he gives her a generous amount of bread in return. We always wait to trade with him when his witch of a wife isn't around, because he's so much nicer. I feel certain he would never have hit his son in the way she did over the burned bread. But why has he come to see me? The baker sits awkwardly on the edge of one of the plush chairs. He's a big, broad-shouldered man with burn scars from years at the ovens. He must have just said goodbye to his son. He pulls a white paper package from his jacket and holds it out to me. I open it and find cookies. These are a luxury we can never afford. Thank you, I say. The baker's not very talkative, at the best of times, and today he's no words at all. I had some of your bread this morning. My friend Gail gave you a squirrel for it. He nods, as if remembering the squirrel. Not your best trade, I say. He shrugs, as if it could possibly matter. I can't think of anything else. So we sit in silence until a peacemaker summons him. He rises and coughs to clear his throat. I'll keep an eye on the little girl, make sure she's eating. I feel some of the pressure in my chest lighten at his words. People deal with me, but they are genuinely fond of Prim. Maybe there will be enough fondness to keep her alive. My next guess is also unexpected. Madge walks in. She's not weepy or evasive. Instead, there's an urgency about her tone that surprises me. They let you wear one thing from our district in the area, one thing to remind you of home. Will you wear this? She holds out the circular gold pin that was on her dress earlier. I hadn't paid much attention to it before, but now that I see it, it's a small bird in flight. Your pin, I say. Wearing a token from the district is about the last thing on my mind. Here, put it on your dress, all right? Madge doesn't wait for an answer. She just leans in and fixes the bird to my dress. Promise you'll wear it to the arena, Katniss? She asks. Promise? Yes, I say. Cookies, a pin. I'm getting all kinds of gifts today. Midge gives me one more, a kiss on the cheek, and then she's gone, and I'm left thinking that really Midge had been my friend all along. Finally, Gale is here, and maybe there is nothing romantic between us, but when he opens his arms, I don't hesitate to go into them. His body is familiar to me, the way it moves, the smell of wood smoke, even the sound of his heart beating, I know from quiet moments on the hunt. But this is the first time I really feel it. Lean in, hard-muscled against my own. Listen, he says, getting a knife should be pretty easy, but you've got to get your hands on a bow. That's your best chance. They don't always have bows, I say, thinking of the year where there were only horrible spiked maces that the tributes had to bludgeon each other to death with. Then make one, says Gale. Even a weak bow is better than no bow at all. I have tried copying my father's bows with poor results. It's not that easy, even when he had to scrap his own work sometimes. I don't even know if they'll be wood, I say. Another year, they tossed everyone into a landscape of nothing but boulders and sand and scruffy brushes. I particularly hated that year. Many contestants were bitten by venomous snakes and went insane from thirst. There's almost always some wood, Gale says. Since the year half of them died of cold. Not much entertainment in that. It's true. We spent one Hunger Games watching the players freeze to death at night. You could hardly see them because they were just huddled in balls. They had no wood for fires or torches or anything. It was considered very anticlimactic in the capital, all those quiet, bloodless deaths. Since then, there's usually been enough wood to make fires. Yes, there's usually some, I say. Katniss, it's just hunting. You're the best hunter I know, says Gale. It's not just hunting. They're armed. They think, I say. So do you. And you've had more practice, real practice, he says. You know how to kill. Not people, I say. How different can it really be? Says Gail grimly. The awful thing is that if I can forget that they're people, it will be no different at all. The peacekeepers are back too soon, and Gail asks for one more time, or for more time, but they're taking him away, and I start to panic. Don't let them starve, I cry out, clinging to his hand. I won't. You know I won't, Katniss. Remember, he says, but they yank us apart and slam the door shut. I'll never know what he wanted me to remember. It's a short ride from the Justice Building to the train station. I've never been in a car before, rarely even ridden in wagons. In the seam, we travel on foot. I've been right not to cry. The station is swarming with reporters and their insect-like cameras trained directly on my face, but I've had a lot of practice at wiping my face clean of emotion, so I do this now. I catch a glimpse of myself on the television screen and the wall that's airing my late arrival. I feel gratified that I appear almost bored. Peter Malark, on the other hand, has obviously been crying, and interestingly enough, does not seem to be trying to cover it up. I immediately wonder if this will be a strategy in the games to appear weak and frightened, to reassure other tributes that he has no competition at all, and then come out fighting. This worked very well for a girl, Joanna Mason from District 7 a few years back. She seemed like such a snivelling, cowardly fool. No one bothered about her until there were only a handful of contestants left. It turned out she could kill viciously. Pretty clever, the way she played it. But this seems an odd strategy for Peter Malark, because he's a baker's son. All those years of having to eat and hauling bread trays around must have made him broad-shouldered and strong. It will take an awful lot of weeping to convince everyone to overlook him. We have to stand for a few minutes in the doorway of the train while the cameras gobble up our images. Then we're allowed inside, and the doors close mercifully behind us. The train begins to move at once. The speed initially takes my breath away. Of course, I've never been on a train. Travel between the districts is forbidden except for officially sanctioned duties. For us, it's mainly transporting coal, but this is no ordinary coal train. This is one high-speed capital model that averages 250 miles per hour. Our journey to the capital will take less than a day. In school, they tell us the capital was built in one place called the Rockies. District 12 was in a region known as Appalachia. Even hundreds of years ago, they mined coal here, which is why our miners have to dig so deep. Somehow, it all seems to come back to coal at school. Besides basic reading and maths, most of our instruction is coal-related, except for the weekly lecture on the history of Panem, as mostly a lot of blather about what we owe the capital. I know there must be more than they're telling us, an actual account of what's happening during the rebellion, but I don't spend much time thinking about it. Whatever the truth is, I don't see how it will help me get food on the table. The tribute train is fancier than even the room in the Justice Building. We're each given our own chambers that have a bedroom, a dressing room, and a private bathroom with hot and cold running water. We don't have hot water at home, unless we boil it. There are drawers filled with fine clothes, and F.A. Trinket tells me to do anything I want, wear anything I want. Everything is at my disposal. Just be ready for supper in an hour. I peel off my mother's blue dress and take a hot shower. I've never had a shower before. It's like being in summer rain, only warmer. I dress in a dark green skirt and trousers. At the last minute, I remember Mage's little gold pin. For the first time, I get a good look at it, as if someone's fashioned a small golden bird, then attached a ring around it. The bird is connected to the ring only by its wingtips. I suddenly recognize it, a mocking jay. They're funny birds, something of a slap in the face to the capital. During the rebellion, the capital bred a series of genetically altered animals as weapons. The common term for them was mutations, or sometimes mutts for short. One was a special bird called a jabberjay that had the ability to memorize and repeat whole human conversations. They were homing birds, exclusively male, that were released into the regions where the capital's enemies were known to be hiding. After the birds gathered words, they'd fly back to the centres to be recorded. It took people a while to realise what was going on in the districts, how private conversations were being transmitted, and then, of course, the rebels fed the capital lies, and the joke was on it. So the centres were shut down and the birds were abandoned to die off in the wild, only they didn't die off. Instead, the jabberjays mated with female mockingbirds, creating a whole new species that could replicate both bird whistles and human melodies. They had lost the ability to enunciate words, but could still mimic a range of human vocal sounds, from a child's high-pitched warble to a man's deep tones. They could recreate songs, just a few notes, or not just a few notes, but whole songs with multiple verses, if you had the patience to sing them, and if they liked your voice. My father was particularly fond of mockingjays. When we went hunting, he would whistle or sing complicated songs to them, and after a polite pause, they'd always sing back. Not everyone is treated with such respect, but when my father sang, all the birds in the area would fall silent and listen. His voice was a beautiful, high and clear, and so filled with life that it made you want to laugh and cry at the same time. I could never bring myself to continue the practice after he was gone. Still, there was something comforting about the little bird. It was like having a piece of my father with me, protecting me. I fastened the pin to my shirt, and with the dark green fabric background, I can almost imagine the mockingjay flying through the trees. Effie Trinket comes to collect me for supper. I follow her through the narrow, rocking corridor into the dining room with polished panels. There's a table where all the dishes are highly breakable. Peter Millark waiting for us, the chair next to him empty. "Where's Hamish?" asked Effie Trinket brightly. "The last time I saw him, he was going to take a nap," says Peter. "Well, he's been well, it's been an exhausting day," says Effie Trinket. "I think she's relieved by Hamish's absence, and who can blame her?" The supper comes in courses: a thick carrot soup, green salad, lamb chops, mashed potatoes, cheese and fruit and chocolate cake. Throughout the meal, Effie Trinket keeps reminding us to save space because there's more to come. But I'm stuffing myself because I've never had food like this. So good and so much, and probably the best thing I can do between now and the games is put on a few pounds. "At least you two have decent manners," says Effie, as we finish the main course. "The pair last year ate everything with their hands like a couple of savages. It completely upset my digestion." The pair last year were two kids from the seam who'd never, not for one day of their lives, had enough to eat, and when they did have food, table manners were surely the last thing on their mind. Peter, a baker's son, my mother taught Prim and me to eat properly, so yes, I can handle a fork and knife, but I hate Effie Trinket's comments so much I made a point of eating the rest of my meal with my fingers. Then I wipe my hands on the tablecloth. This makes her purse her lips tightly together. Now the meal's over, I'm fighting to keep the food down. I can see Peter's looking a little green too. Neither of our stomachs is used to such rich fare, but if I can hold down Greasy Say's concoction of mice meat, pig entrails, and tree bark, a winter specialty, I'm determined to hang on to this. We go to another compartment and watch the recap of the reapings across Panem. They tried to stagger them throughout the day, so a person could conceivably watch the whole thing live, but only people in the capital could really do that, since none of them have to attend the reapings themselves. One by one, we see the other reapings, the names called, volunteers stepping forward, or, more often than not, we examine the faces of the kids who will be our competition. A few stand out in my mind: a monstrous boy who lunges forward to volunteer from District 2, a fox-faced girl with sleek red hair from District 5, a boy with crippled foot from District 10. and most hauntingly, a 12-year-old girl from District 11. She has dark brown skin and eyes, but other than that, she's very like Prim in size and demeanour. Only when she mounts the stage and they ask for volunteers, all you can hear is the wind whistling through the decrepit buildings around her. There's no one willing to take her place. Last of all, they show District 12, Prim being called, me running forward to volunteer. You can't miss the desperation in my voice as I shove Prim behind me. And if I'm afraid, and as if I'm afraid no one will hear me and they'll take Prim away. But of course, they do hear. I see Gail pulling her off me. I watch myself mount the stage. The commentators not sure what to say about the crowd's refusal to applaud. The silent salute. One says that District 12 has always been a bit backward, but the local customs can be charming. As if on cue, Hamish falls off the stage and groans comically. Peter's name is drawn, and he quietly takes his place. We shake hands, and they cut to the anthem again, and the programme ends. Effie Trinket is disgruntled about the state of her wig was in. Your mentor has a lot to learn about presentation, a lot about televised behaviour. Peter laughs unexpectedly. He was drunk, says Peter. He's drunk every year. Every day, I add. I can't help smirking a little. Effie Trinket makes the sound like Hamish has just somewhat rough manners, could be corrected with a few tips from her. Yes, hisses Effie Trinket. How odd you two find it amusing. You know your mentor is your lifeline in the world in these games, the one who advises you, lines up your sponsors, and dictates the presentation of any gifts. Hamish can well be the difference between your life and your death. Just then, Hamish staggers into the compartment. I miss supper, he said in a slurred voice. Then he vomits all over the expensive carpet and falls in the mess. So laugh away, says F.A. Trinket. She hops in her pointy shoes around the pool of vomit and flees the room. And that's the end of chapter 4. Gonna leave it there for tonight. If you are on Twitch, I will be putting this up on YouTube, and if you're on YouTube, follow me on Twitch. We'll be reading stories like this most nights. And thanks for listening.